The dinner was, as always, a performance. It was being held at my parents' house, a place of polished surfaces and quiet, judgmental silences. The occasion was a celebration for my older sister, Vanessa. She had just landed the cover of a major fashion magazine, and the family had gathered to pay tribute to their golden child. I arrived late, a habit my family interpreted as another one of my many failures. I slipped into my seat at the long, formal dining table, hoping to go unnoticed. But Vanessa's eyes, sharp and critical, found me immediately. They scanned my dress, and a slow, condescending smile spread across her perfect face. I was wearing a simple, dark green silk dress. It had clean lines, no embellishments, and it fell in a way that felt like water flowing over skin. It was comfortable. It was me. To my sister, it was a target. "Oh, Kathy," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire table to hear. She didn't wait for me to reply. She turned to our parents, a look of theatrical pity on her face. "I just don't know what we're going to do with her. Still shopping in the bargain bin, are we?" She looked back at me, her smile widening into a grin. "You're the failure of the house, little sister, but do you have to dress the part?" My father chuckled, a low, rumbling sound of agreement. My mother just gave a tight, disappointed smile and shook her head, as if my very presence was a problem she couldn't solve. The rest of the family, aunts and cousins, followed their lead, their faces a mixture of pity and amusement. I felt the familiar heat of humiliation creep up my neck. For years, I had been the family's designated disappointment. Vanessa was the star, the beautiful, ambitious model who traveled the world and graced the covers of magazines. I was the quiet one, the artistic one, the one who lived in a small apartment and had, in their eyes, done nothing with my life. They saw my simple life as evidence of my failure, my quietness as a lack of drive. But tonight, something was different. The familiar sting of their words didn't hit me in the same way. I looked at my sister, so confident in her cruelty, so secure in her position as the family's success story. She had no idea what she was talking about. She had no idea what she was wearing, what she was modeling, or who she was working for. I didn't defend my dress. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just met her gaze across the table, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I gave her a small, quiet smile. "You know, you're right, Vanessa," I said, my voice perfectly even. "I've been thinking about making some changes." She laughed, a triumphant, barking sound. "Well, it's about time. Maybe you can start by getting a real job." My parents nodded in enthusiastic agreement. They thought I was finally admitting defeat. They thought I was finally ready to listen to them, to try and be more like my perfect older sister. They thought I was submitting. They were wrong. My mind flashed back to that afternoon, just 3 hours earlier. I wasn't in a bargain bin. I was in a sleek, minimalist office high above the city, a place my family didn't even know existed. The office of the CEO of Aura. My CEO. Mr. Blackwood had placed a document on the polished glass desk in front of me. It was a contract termination. The name at the top was Vanessa Adams, my sister. "Are you sure about this, Catherine?" he had asked, his voice quiet and respectful. "The campaign is doing very well." "I'm sure," I had said, my voice firm. "Her behavior on set has been unprofessional and is damaging to the brand's image. The morality clause is clear." I picked up the heavy black fountain pen. I signed my name at the bottom, my signature clear and steady. The founder of Aura had made a decision. Mr. Blackwood had then stamped it with the date and the exact time, 3:15 p.m. My sister had been fired from the most important job of her career before she even sat down for dinner. She just didn't know it yet. She was mocking a dress she didn't understand, owned by a sister she had never bothered to see. She thought she was at a celebration of her success. She had no idea she was at her own professional funeral, and I was the one who had just signed the death certificate. The scene at the dinner table wasn't a surprise. It was just a louder, more public version of a song my family had been singing my whole life. The song was called "Vanessa is the Star and Catherine is the Shadow." From the moment we were born, we were cast in our roles. Vanessa was the beautiful one. She had bright, sparkling eyes and a confidence that drew people to her like moths to a flame. I was the quiet one, the observer. I had the same face as her, but I wore it differently. Where she was loud, I was soft. Where she was bold, I was thoughtful. Our parents saw her loudness as passion and my quietness as a lack of it. I remember our 10th birthday. We were given 2 bicycles. Vanessa's was a flashy, bright pink model with streamers on the handlebars. Mine was a simple, sturdy blue one. Vanessa immediately jumped on hers and raced down the street, shouting for everyone to look at her. I stayed behind, fascinated by the chain and the gears, trying to understand how it all worked. My father had clapped his hands and laughed. "That's my girl," he'd said, pointing at Vanessa, always out in front. He had looked at me, still crouched by my bike, and just shaken his head with a sigh. As we grew up, the roles became more defined. Vanessa discovered modeling in high school. Her beauty, once a childhood trait, became a commodity. She was celebrated for it. Our house became a shrine to her success. Her modeling photos lined the hallways. Her trophies from beauty pageants sat on the mantelpiece. I, on the other hand, discovered art. I loved to draw, to paint, to create things with my hands. My room was my sanctuary, filled with sketchbooks, canvases, and the smell of turpentine. My parents saw my art not as a passion, but as a hobby, a childish pastime I was supposed to grow out of. "You can't make a living from scribbling in a notebook, Catherine," my father would say, his voice laced with disappointment. "Look at your sister. She's ambitious. She's making a name for herself. Why can't you be more like her?" The ultimate proof of our designated roles came on our 21st birthday. My parents threw a huge party for us. At the end of the night, my father stood up to make a speech. He talked about how proud he was of Vanessa, of her budding career, her drive, her beauty. Then he turned to me. "And to Catherine," he said, and the whole room could hear the "but" hanging in the air. "We hope that one day you'll find your path, too." Then came the gifts. For Vanessa, there was a small velvet box. Inside was a key to a brand new convertible, parked out front with a giant red bow on it. The crowd cheered. For me, there was an envelope. Inside was a gift certificate for a career counseling course. The message was clear. Vanessa was a success to be rewarded. I was a problem to be solved. I never blamed Vanessa, not really. She was just playing the part she had been given. She thrived on the attention, the praise. It was like oxygen to her. And because she was the star, she believed she had the right to treat me, the shadow, however she wanted. She saw my lack of interest in her world of fashion and fame as a judgment. My quiet life was an insult to her glamorous one, so she made fun of my clothes, my small apartment, my lack of a real job. It was her way of reminding me and everyone else of our places. She was the winner, I was the loser. I endured it for years. I smiled through the backhanded compliments. I nodded through the lectures about my lack of ambition. I retreated further into my own world, the world of my art, the only place where I wasn't being compared or judged. I let them believe I was a failure. It was easier than fighting. It was easier than trying to explain a part of myself they had no interest in understanding. I let them build a cage of low expectations around me, never realizing that inside that cage, I was quietly building an empire. My empire didn't start with a grand vision. It started with a loss, a legacy, and a love for things that are made well. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was a woman cut from a different cloth than my parents. She was practical, hardworking, and saw value in things that were real and tangible. She owned a small, old textile mill in the industrial part of the city. It was a relic from another era, a place that smelled of machine oil and raw cotton. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. When she passed away, she left the mill to me. My parents were horrified. "A dusty old factory," my father had said with disgust. "Sell it, Catherine. Take the money and do something sensible with it. Go back to school." Vanessa had laughed. "Great. Now you're the queen of a sweatshop. How fitting." I went to the mill the day after the funeral. It was quiet, the looms standing silent like sleeping giants. But as I walked through the building, I saw what my grandmother had seen. The quality, The old machines, though slow, were incredibly precise. They wove fabrics, silks, cashmeres, fine wools, with a density and a texture that modern high-speed looms couldn't replicate. The place wasn't a factory, it was an artisan's workshop. I didn't sell it. For the next year, I spent every day at the mill. I learned every part of the process, from sourcing the raw fibers to the final weave. I used my artistic eye not to paint on a canvas, but to create new colors, new textures. I developed a silk that was almost weightless, but incredibly strong. I created a cashmere blend that felt like a cloud. I wasn't just making fabric, I was making art. But art needs a frame. I knew I had something special. But I also knew the world of high fashion was brutal and exclusive. I couldn't just walk in as Catherine, the quiet girl with no connections. I needed a different identity. That's when the idea for Aura was born. Aura would be a brand built on a secret. It would be the opposite of everything my sister's world represented. It wouldn't be about flashy logos or celebrity endorsements. It would be about the product itself. Minimalist designs, perfect tailoring, and the most exquisite fabrics in the world. The clothes would speak for themselves, and the brand's owner would be a mystery. In a world where designers were celebrities, the founder of Aura would be anonymous, a ghost, a legend. This anonymity would be the brand's greatest marketing tool. It would create a mystique, a sense of discovery. People would buy Aura not because of who made it, but because of how it made them feel. I used the inheritance my grandmother had also left me to hire the best people. I found a brilliant young designer who understood my minimalist vision. I hired a small team of the most skilled tailors I could find, and most importantly, I found Mr. Blackwood. He was a retired executive from a major luxury goods company, a man with a sterling reputation and a deep understanding of the industry. I met with him in secret. I showed him the fabrics. I laid out my vision for Aura. He saw the potential immediately. He agreed to become the public face of the company, the CEO. He would handle the press, the buyers, the entire public-facing side of the business. I would remain the founder, the silent, invisible owner, directing everything from the shadows. We launched Aura 2 years ago with a single small collection. We didn't have a fashion show. We didn't send out press releases. We simply placed the collection in a handful of the most exclusive, influential boutiques in Paris, London, and New York. The reaction was immediate. Fashion editors, stylists, and celebrities were mystified. Who was Aura? Where did it come from? The clothes were unlike anything else. The quality was breathtaking. The anonymity of the founder only fueled the fire. Aura became the ultimate insider's brand. It was a secret you were either in on or you weren't. Within 2 years, my grandmother's dusty old mill had become the heart of a multi-million-dollar fashion empire, and no one, least of all my family, had any idea. They still saw me as Catherine, the failure. They had no idea that in the world they so desperately admired, I was the queen. The ultimate irony, the twist that even I couldn't have written, came 6 months before the fateful dinner party. It arrived in the form of an email from Mr. Blackwood with the subject line, "New Campaign Proposal." Aura had become so successful, so sought after, that we decided it was time to launch our first official advertising campaign. It had to be perfect. It had to capture the brand's mystique and elegance. We needed a face for the campaign, but not just any model. We needed someone who embodied a modern, confident beauty, someone at the absolute peak of her career. Mr. Blackwood's proposal included a short list of the top 5 models in the world, and there, at number 2, was a name that made my heart stop. Vanessa Adams. My sister. My first instinct was to say no, absolutely not. It was too close, too risky. But then a different thought crept in. What could be more anonymous, more perfectly hidden, than having my own sister be the face of my company? She, more than anyone, would never suspect. She saw me as a complete and utter failure, the furthest thing from the fashion world she inhabited. Hiring her would be the ultimate camouflage. And there was another, darker part of me that was intrigued. It was a chance to be a ghost in my own sister's life, to watch her from the inside, to see if she was truly the person I thought she was. Against my better judgment, I gave Mr. Blackwood the green light. "Proceed with the offer to Vanessa Adams," I wrote back, "but I want daily reports on her conduct, everything." When Vanessa got the call from her agent, she practically exploded with joy. She called me immediately, her voice shrill with excitement. "Kathy, you are not going to believe this. I got it. I got the Aura campaign. Do you have any idea how huge this is? They only work with the best. The founder, no one knows who it is, but they say they're a complete genius, hand-picked me." I had to sit down. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. "Wow, Vanessa," I said, my voice a masterpiece of feigned surprise. "That's amazing." For the next several months, my life became a surreal work of fiction. I would spend my days in my studio, reviewing the photos from Vanessa's shoots. I would approve the lighting, the styling, the final images for the campaign that would soon be in every major fashion magazine. I was, in effect, my sister's boss, directing her every professional move. Then I would go to family dinner and have to listen to her talk endlessly about my company. "The fabrics are just divine. You wouldn't understand, Kathy," she'd say, waving her hand dismissively. "The quality is beyond anything I've ever worked with. The founder is a complete perfectionist." "The shoots are so demanding," she would complain, though she was being paid a fortune. "They have such high standards, but it's worth it to be a part of something so exclusive." Meanwhile, Mr. Blackwood's daily reports painted a very different picture. Vanessa was a nightmare to work with. She was consistently late. She was rude to the photographers, the stylists, the makeup artists. She treated the crew like her personal servants. She complained constantly. She acted as if her fame gave her a free pass to be unprofessional and unkind. Ms. Adams was 45 minutes late this morning, blamed traffic. She refused to wear the coat for the final shot, saying it wasn't her color. The designer had to intervene. She made a junior stylist cry by calling her incompetent. I read every report, and a quiet, sad anger began to build in me. I had created Aura to be a brand of quiet quality, of respect for craftsmanship. Vanessa, with her arrogance and her entitlement, was the antithesis of everything my company stood for. She was wearing the clothes, but she didn't understand them. She was the face of my brand, but she was poisoning its soul. I saw that the beautiful, confident sister I had grown up with had become a cruel, entitled woman. She believed her own hype. She thought she was untouchable. She had no idea that her entire career was now in the hands of the one person in the world she had never, ever respected. The final straw wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet phone call on a Tuesday afternoon, the day of the dinner party. It was the moment a lifetime of small cuts turned into a single deep wound. I was in my studio, a quiet, light-filled space that was my sanctuary. I was sketching, working on the preliminary designs for the next season's collection, when my phone rang. It was my mother. "Catherine, darling, I just wanted to check if you're still coming to dinner tonight," she said, her voice bright and a little strained. She was always trying to smooth things over, to pretend we were a normal, happy family. "I'll be there, Mom," I said, my pencil still moving across the page. "Oh, good. Vanessa is here with me now. We were just having a cup of tea. Say hello, Vanessa." There was a rustle, and then I heard my sister's voice, not talking to me but to someone else in the room. My mother must have put the phone on speaker. Vanessa was talking loudly, full of her own importance. "No, I told my agent, it's perfect," she was saying, and she let out a loud, braying laugh. "I'm going to get my loser sister an internship at Aura. Can you imagine? She could fetch coffee for the models. She could learn a thing or two about what a real job looks like. It would be absolutely hilarious." The pencil in my hand stopped moving. A cold, heavy stillness spread through my chest. It wasn't just the insult. I was used to the insults. It was the casual, public cruelty of it. She was plotting to humiliate me, to turn my life into a joke for her own amusement, and the ultimate bitter irony was that she was planning to do it at my own company. She wanted to offer me a menial pity job in the empire I had built, in the world where I was queen. She wanted me to fetch coffee in my own palace. My mother's flustered voice came back on the line. "Oh, Vanessa, don't be silly. Catherine is happy with her life." The weakness in her defense, the way she couldn't even bring herself to say I was successful, was almost as painful as Vanessa's words. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I just sat there, listening to my sister laugh about my failure, a failure she had invented and that my parents had endorsed. The years of quiet pain, of swallowing insults, of making myself smaller to keep the peace, it all coalesced into a single, hard point of clarity. I was done. I was done being their disappointment. I was done being the shadow to her star. I was done being quiet. "Kathy? Are you still there?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I'm here, Mom," I said, and my voice was perfectly calm, perfectly steady. "I have to go. I have a meeting to get to. I'll see you tonight." I hung up the phone before she could reply. I sat in the silence of my studio for a full minute. The anger I felt wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and efficient. It was a business decision. Vanessa was no longer just a difficult sister. She was a liability to my brand. Her attitude, her arrogance, her plan to use my company as a stage for her family drama, it was unprofessional. It was a breach of the image Aura was built on. I picked up my phone again and dialed Mr. Blackwood's direct line. "Mr. Blackwood," I said when he answered, "I need you to draw up Vanessa Adams's termination papers. Cite the morality clause and her documented unprofessional behavior on set. I'll be there in an hour to sign them." There was no hesitation in his voice. He knew my tone. This was not a request from Catherine the sister. This was an order from the founder. "Of course," he said. "I'll have them ready." As I drove to the office, I felt a strange sense of peace. For my entire life, my family had underestimated me. They had defined me by what they thought I lacked. They had no idea what I had built. Tonight, at dinner, my sister was planning to mock my dress, to laugh at my life. She had no idea that her own life, the glamorous career she was so proud of, was already over, and I was the one who had ended it. After I walked out of the dinner party, I didn't go home. I went to my studio. I put on some quiet classical music, poured myself a glass of wine, and began to paint. I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt a profound sense of quiet. The final thread of obligation that had tied me to my family's expectations had been cut. I was free. The chaos I knew would begin in the morning. Vanessa would have woken up in her pristine white apartment, probably nursing a slight hangover from the celebratory champagne. She would have reached for her phone, expecting to see a flood of congratulatory messages about her magazine cover. Instead, she would have seen a single, formal email. The subject line would have been simple: "Regarding your contract with Aura." She would have opened it with a flicker of annoyance, not concern. She would have laughed at first, assuming it was some kind of administrative error. The email from Aura's legal department would have been polite, professional, and brutal. It would inform her that her contract as the exclusive face of the brand had been terminated, effective immediately due to repeated breaches of the professional conduct clause. It would also inform her that, as per the terms of that same clause, the company was invoking the penalty fee for damaging the brand's reputation. They would be demanding the return of a significant portion of her multi-million-dollar contract payment. Her laughter would have died in her throat. She would have called her agent, expecting him to fix it, but her agent would already be in a full-blown panic. He would have received the same email along with a formal letter from Mr. Blackwood himself, stating that the decision was final and non-negotiable. Vanessa's world, so shiny and perfect just hours before, would have started to crumble. She would have called our parents, her voice a shrill, hysterical shriek. "They fired me! Can you believe it? Aura fired me!" My father, a man who believed any problem could be solved by making a phone call to the right person, would have sprung into action. He would have called his friends, his business contacts, anyone he thought had influence in the fashion world. "I need to speak to the owner of Aura." he would have demanded, and everywhere he would have been met with the same polite, impenetrable wall. "I'm sorry, sir, but the founder is anonymous. No one speaks to the founder directly. All communications go through Mr. Blackwood's office." He would have tried to bully Mr. Blackwood's secretary, who would have calmly informed him that Mr. Blackwood was in back-to-back meetings and could not be disturbed. My parents, who had built their lives on the power of their social connections, would find that their connections were useless. They were trying to fight a ghost. By midday, the news would have hit the industry blogs. Vanessa Adams dropped by Aura. The story would spread like wildfire. In the cutthroat world of high fashion, a firing this sudden and this public is a death sentence. It signals that a model is difficult, unprofessional, a liability. The rumors of her behavior on set, which had been whispered among stylists and photographers, would now become front-page gossip. No other major brand would touch her. Her career, which had seemed so untouchable, would be instantly and irrevocably torpedoed. I could picture the scene at my parents' house. Vanessa, hysterical, crying about her ruined career. My mother, wringing her hands, trying to comfort her. My father, red-faced and furious, pacing the room, unable to comprehend his own powerlessness. They would, of course, blame me. Not because they suspected the truth. That was a reality too insane for them to even contemplate. They would blame me because in their world, I was the source of all disappointment. They would probably concoct a story where my quiet, simple life had somehow brought bad luck, bad energy, upon their golden child. My failure was so profound, it had become contagious. I stayed in my studio all day, the city humming below me. My phone was off. I didn't need to hear their frantic calls. I knew what was happening. I had set the dominoes up over years of quiet work, and last night, with a single, calm decision, I had tipped the first one over. Now, all I had to do was listen to them fall. They came for me 2 days later. I knew they would. I was in my studio, the place they thought of as my little hobby room, when the buzzer rang. It was my father, his voice tight with a rage he was barely controlling. "Catherine, we are coming up. We need to talk to you." I let them in. My father, my mother, and Vanessa all stormed into my quiet, light-filled space. It was the first time they had ever been here. They looked around at the large canvases, the sketches pinned to the walls, the bolts of exquisite fabrics draped over chairs. They looked at it all with disdain, as if the very sight of my creative life was an insult. Vanessa's face was a wreck. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her perfect skin blotchy. She looked broken. "You have to fix this," she sobbed, her voice raw. "You have to do something." "What would you possibly expect me to do, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice calm. I was sitting on a simple wooden stool, a charcoal pencil in my hand. "You have to call them," my father boomed, stepping forward. "Use your connections. Whatever meager connections you have. Plead with them. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them your sister is a good person." I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was wringing her hands, her face a mask of anxiety. I looked at my sister, who was looking at me with a mixture of desperation and contempt, as if she couldn't believe she had been reduced to asking her failure of a sister for help. The time for quiet was over. I put down my pencil and stood up. I walked over to my sleek, minimalist desk in the corner. I opened my laptop. "You want me to call them?" I said. "All right." I turned the laptop around so they could see the screen. The home page was the internal corporate dashboard for Aura. It showed real-time sales figures, inventory levels, and financial projections. They stared at it, confused. "What is this?" my father demanded. "This is my company," I said simply. I clicked a file. A scanned document appeared on the screen. It was the original deed for the textile mill, signed over to me from my grandmother. I clicked again. The official incorporation documents for Aura, listing me, Catherine Adams, as the 100% owner and sole board member. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer. I watched their faces as the impossible truth began to dawn on them. My father's face went slack with disbelief. My mother brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Vanessa just stared, her expression completely blank. You are the founder?" she whispered, the words barely audible. "I am," I said. I wasn't finished. I opened another file. It was a folder full of the daily reports from Mr. Blackwood, detailing every instance of Vanessa's unprofessional behavior. I played a short audio clip, recorded by a sound technician on set, of Vanessa screaming at a wardrobe assistant. Her ugly, entitled voice filled my quiet studio. Then I brought up the final document, the scanned image of her termination contract with my signature at the bottom, clearly stamped with the date and time, 3 hours before the dinner party. "You see," I said, my voice soft but clear, "you were fired long before you ever opened your mouth to criticize my dress. That dress, by the way, was a one-of-a-kind couture piece from the new collection. It's valued at $30,000. They were speechless. They were staring at a ghost, at a woman they had never known. Then I delivered the final blow. "And Dad," I said, turning to my father, who looked like he might collapse, "you might want to call your financial advisor. A significant portion of your investment portfolio, the one that funds your entire lifestyle, is heavily invested in a certain small textile business that showed incredible growth potential. My business." I let the words hang in the air. "Your financial future," I said, closing the laptop, "is now entirely in the hands of the failure of the house." I turned my back on them then. I picked up my charcoal pencil and returned to my sketch. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look at them. I just listened to the sound of their world shattering into a million pieces. I listened to the beautiful, profound silence of my own name, finally spoken in a language they could understand, the language of power.